created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm. And
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, that humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that.
Audio or text, and then there's big metaverse bug. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
All right. I have few people here, but people that are the best in doing AI is not here. So it falls on me to say AI. The voice that doesn't allow that chant to come out properly. But Masako, I think, you have a good grasp of it.
Oh, for my I?
Yeah, go for it.
I have a couple of them because it's either I or
That's the one. That's the second one.
Right. So the second one is like, yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, it's emotions, right? In between all languages, this explains all sorts of emotions. Either you're embarrassed by somebody, like ay, or you're just not happy with this happening. So we've had people that speaks multiple languages, and they said, wow, in all languages you can find similarities of AI, because we start off very enthusiastically, and sometimes we end with, just, man, this is a lot of burden in our shoulder. Or sometimes you just feel optimistic, so you're like, let's go dance, right? So, Tony and Darcy, how are you guys feeling? What's your energy level today?
Pretty good. I could try.
Could you give us an I,
I say I all the time.
There you go.
I live in, and I kind of like that.
There you go.
I.
I'll go the French version. Ooh la la.
Oh, I love it.
If we have to broadcast in France, we have to change it to ooh la la AI or something like that. That's great.
Exactement, mon ami.
I got a little bit of that, not the whole sentence. So we wow, what a topic we have. Well, I think we need this sort of humors in order to discuss one of the topics that everybody can say, I don't want to talk about that. It just, not me, right? You go around the table like, who wants to talk about this? And they all say like, unless you know much about it, nobody's going to say anything about it. So we need somebody to explain what GRC is, right? Somebody to explain CMMC, somebody to tell us what happens in a data breach, right? So I guess the episode is called I'm in my AI Mojo, right? We want to talk about AI, but we want to talk about AI for something that we really don't want to do ourselves. But because we are subject matter experts in our field, we know how AI can escalate that sort of, I guess, the energy, right? Energy of GRC, energy of CMMC. And the scary topic of data breach, right? Nobody wants to be part of that, but everybody loves data, except for the data breach part of it, right? So I'm super thrilled. I mean, this is something that I can talk for hours, right? I'm that one guy sitting on the table saying like, oh, me, right? And people say like, talk to yourself. Nobody else is listening. But, well, there's always somebody in the table like me. They just don't know it yet, right? They don't know it because they don't have the proper context of what GRC is. They don't understand CMMC. They don't understand data breach. If they had some sort of the familiarity, they kind of say like, oh, that can be me. I want to do that, right? And that's what we do a lot, right? Our AI community, we promote these sort of diverse thinking. And when you have this diverse thinking, you find out there's a subject matter expert in each table. They just don't know it yet, right? So my good friend Tony and my good friend Darcy, I've been hoping that you guys will come to this discussion sooner than later. And now that we're here as a friend, as in a circle, me, Masako, Tony, and Darcy, we can talk about these topics in a very energetic manner and talk to the people that are listening and say, this might not be the most interesting topic in the world, but it's definitely something that is worth talking about, and especially with AI, right? It makes a huge difference. So without further ado, Masako, I'll pass it off to you, and then we can take turn in introducing ourselves. And
right. Well, it's so funny, Asif, when you said that it's not interesting, and I was like, GRC, governance, risk management, and compliance. That is very much interesting and very much exciting, and you really have to show up with that space, because we all know if there's no governance, risk management, or compliance, things fall apart. And being that AI, the III podcast is all about AI. And so for me, it's like AI is no longer a science fiction, right? Everybody thought of AI as science fiction, but what it is, it's infrastructure. And without GRC, the infrastructure is without regulation. And without regulation, that's where chaos lives.
Yeah.
And so that's why governance, risk management, and compliance is needed, to get rid of the chaos.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here today to talk about it, because we have subject matter experts in the cybersecurity space, in the governance space. And so that's why we have Darcy and Tony, and you guys are subject matter experts in your own right. And so we want to invite you into this conversation across AI, governance, and compliance, and the new space of the CMMC space for cybersecurity, because throughout the DoD, many organizations must be in compliance in the CMMC space, and that creates opportunity for people to have longevity in careers, to change careers, and to really be able to do a service for our country, to do well for themselves and do well for the organizations that represent us. But let's dive deeper into what you guys have to say about what I'm talking about.
Well, you talk about chaos, and that's the realm I live in, is the front side of the house that everybody hears when you call 911. That's the chaos. We can't afford the chaos in the back end. So GRC is for the back end of 911. That's our bread and butter. That influences every decision that we make, whether it's what we purchase, how we deploy, how we report, how we answer, even things like a FOIA request. We have to maintain that control in the back end, because the front end can go from an orderly day to absolute chaos in 1 second. And they depend on us to keep everything as calm and as controlled as possible. So compliance is not an option. It is a requirement. So you don't have that. You don't have the chance to say, I'll get to it later. It's, in many cases, it's stop what you're doing and take care of it right this second.
And Tony, that's a space of people's safety, which is part of what we talk about with cybersecurity, and time. Time is of the essence. So people having standards and knowing what to do, what procedures to follow, what steps to take, saves lives in what you do.
Well, yeah, we're definitely protocol driven. Yeah. Everything we do front end and back end is protocol driven.
Yeah, I think before we started this discussion, I couldn't stop laughing because we talked about movies, right? Movies can go through scenes in few split seconds, but in reality, that few split seconds is multiple days, if not multiple months and multiple years. And this is where people see GRC from that lens right there, is that, oh my goodness, it takes so much because of something like GRC. If it wasn't for GRC, we wouldn't be doing most of those things, first of all. And second of all, we will continuously live in chaos. And if you know one thing about countries that don't have GRCs, is chaos. And I don't mean it lightly as in it's an organizational thing. It's a nation state thing, right? It impacts every level of society. So when Tony talks about 911, it fascinates me to the core. It's just, wow. Like, you think about hospitals. Yeah, that has a lot of compliance in it. Banking, a lot of compliance. Credit card, a lot of compliance. Policing, a lot of compliance. Just everything you can look at organizational that has people, process, or whatever that comes with the process, they all have compliance built into it. So people have to know about this compliance ahead of time, pre-trained. And this goes for the job seekers. Hey, look, if you are thinking of getting a job in any industry, how much do you know about GRC for that industry? Because if you do, all of a sudden you see something that nobody else can see if they jump right into that industry without knowing the GRC of it. Right. So just a quick example, if you're getting into the banking industry, do you know what KYC stands for? Right. KYC is what drives the whole banking industry most of the time because of the regulation. Know your customer, right? KYC. So these kind of GRC components that we always have to be on lookout for, it starts with people that are seeking careers, people that are trying to switch careers, or people that are just trying to move up the ladder, right? Being from tactical to operational. Operational is strategic, right? As you're trying to move up the ladder, you always have to know these GRC topics like back of your hand, I would say, right? If you're a strategic person that is making swift moves and swift decisions, yet you're not really compliant, yeah, let's not go that far. That's a nightmare. But I have a question that I would really like to start off with Darcy specifically, because Darcy and I talk about cybersecurity a lot. And when it comes to cybersecurity, the CMMC space is just, let's just put it like this. You don't have CMMC today because you're not dealing with government. I'm going to bet you that you're going to have CMMC sooner than later, because that's just a standard of cybersecurity. You cannot avoid that. For a long time, we have done without it, but because of how much AI is involved in cybersecurity threats now, the CMMC is like not must tomorrow, must 10 years ago, right? We should have built up to that defense category of saying AI can try, but most likely won't succeed. But because of AI, the cybersecurity topic is off the cuff right now. So let's get started with you, Darcy. I know CMMC, but tell us a little bit about CMMC. Tell us a little bit about your involvement with it, and what are some of the things that you are looking out for?
Okay. Well, my role with the Del Mar College Cyber Center is I'm the program manager. And what we do is work with small and mid-sized businesses on their cyber awareness, their hygiene, planning, and for those that are seeking contracts with the Department of Defense or government entities, we help them with CMMC certification level 1 and some at level 2. So we are in an area where businesses are working with government entities a lot, and we have a lot of industry. We're on the Gulf of Mexico, South Texas, and there we are seeing that even our industry partners, a lot of their vulnerabilities are their vendors, are their so they may have good controls and good practices, but the people that they're contracting with may not have those stringent rules or practices. So they're really starting, even in the commercial space, to have some of these requirements for their vendors to make sure that they have access controls, that they are following the rules, the standards that are required to protect the information that they're handling as part of their contract, and any other data that might be like IP, physical locations, information, that kind of thing that they may need to be accessing for their contract, even if they're, say, a landscaper, that they need to have some level of cybersecurity. They need to be in compliance, and they need to be able to demonstrate it with documented protocols, with policies, and mapping and inventorying what they have to demonstrate that they're controlling those pieces. It's a lot when you think about somebody in a small business who, you know, they don't have very many resources often. They're, enterprising, they're innovative, they're trying to wear all the hats. So they're one of the biggest vulnerabilities we have in cybersecurity, because they don't have the time or the expertise to become experts. So that's one of the areas where we assist businesses, and where we're seeing a big push for education and creating those resources for the most vulnerable populations, because part of everything that we do when we're talking about GRC, even, it's about agreement. It's about having a common framework, a common language that we all agree to, so that we can operate and together be bigger than, all the parts that are going into this operation.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned it, I mean, complexity doesn't start with what we think is where complexity ends, right? Like, say, for example, a prime that's looking for a sub that is going to vendor for the prime vendor, and there's tier 1, there's tier 2, there's tier 4, there's tiers 10, right? Depending on the size of the contract, because subcontractors know this very well, that they don't do the work. They hand the work out to somebody after they win the work, right? So if you are a government agency that is saying, I want CMMC on your paperwork, well, does that other person have the paperwork? And
Right.
This is nothing new, by the way, like insurance coverages, right? Insurance coverages is required by the contractor for the subcontractors and the subcontractor. But somewhere in the pipeline, if one subcontractor had an insurance that expired, all of a sudden there's a big issue over here. Well, as a contractor, you got to know that some of your subs didn't have that insurance, right? So when you think about it from that perspective, all of a sudden, like, wait, did you do your CMMC? You haven't, and you've been working on this for the last 5 months? Who's responsible here? Who's at fault for, that passing of information back and forth? Or in insurance cases, does the insurance company cover your claim anymore because you expired, knowing that you expired, and the whole situation does not get covered by anybody? And that's I love how you started with the subcontractor, because that's oh my goodness, that's complexity 101.
Those are the people I'm working with.
Yeah.
The primes have the resources often to reach what they need to do for compliance, because it can be very costly. It requires maintenance. It requires expertise. It's a very difficult space for the average business owner. And like you were saying, if we're just talking government contracting, or just even DoD contracting, the federal government doesn't do any of the things. They contract for everything that they do. So they exist because of all these businesses that feed the pipeline, and we have a serious issue with vulnerabilities because of that. I mean, we operate a lot in our country with a lot of trust, and which is great. That's part of what's wonderful about being here. Unfortunately, it does make us vulnerable to the bad guys that are out there just for their little piece.
I'm just gonna say it out loud. People are not stealing information from us because it's just money, right? Yeah. People are stealing ideas. People are stealing a process. People are stealing that talent, right? Or sabotaging, poisoning, right?
Yes.
I can go on, because when you think about anything bad activity, you can think of something like, oh, it's about money. Yes, it's about money, but you have to look at it from multiple levels of engagement, because not everybody just wants money. Somebody wants to make their own money, so they want to sabotage somebody else. And this goes in all levels, right? We can think of it from, oh, this happens in the DoD. Well, no, it happens in corporate space too. So that's what I meant earlier about CMMC, that it's not just about DoD today. You have to start thinking about CMMC in a way that is like, if I don't have it today, who's going to put that on me for 5 years from now that says, if you don't have that SOC, right? If you don't have that kind of compliance in place, I'm not going to do business with you, right? And that's happening in the commercial space already. So when it comes to CMMC, you have to start thinking about like, my goodness, like what kind of business am I not going to be able to do in the future because nobody wants to share information with me, interact with me on information, and now I don't have any business, right?
I'm glad. It's so funny, Darcy, when I was listening to you about the prime, the subprime, the business, the enterprise, the small business, the government businesses, and Asif just confirmed that with regard to what he's saying. It's like, for me, it's like everyone thinks that their story is unique, but guess what? Everyone is living the exact same story on a different block.
Yeah.
And so no longer is it the prime now has to be the one, like every individual, every business owner, every entity has to be CMMC certified. They have to get checked off in order for them to do business. You can no longer say that has nothing to do with me, give it to someone else if that's their responsibility. It's each of our responsibilities. And we are in this present day situation where now it's like, now it's opportunity. It's not something that someone, it's not the time to blame and say, oh, you did this, you didn't do that. Now is an opportunity for each business owner or each individual that would like to be successful in a career to say that there is a space for me. You know what? This is my opportunity to be trained in the CMMC space so I can be of service to my communities, my community members, the businesses within my communities, the government agencies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, it's no longer that's them, not me. No, it's a us thing. It's a we thing. And everyone has the responsibility to say, you know what, I'll take responsibility for that, just for yourself and the circle around you, to be a change maker within your community for business.
Yeah, I mean, we're not even talking about AI at this point, and this is an AI pocket. But this is how we slowly move into the AI discussions here. Because
but wait a minute, because here's my thing on that, because it goes hand in hand. Because if we're talking about present day, then we are talking about AI, because the fusion of AI with GRC, which leads into CMMC, it's no longer optional. It's essential for resilience, real-time decision-making, and risk prediction. So we cannot have one without the other. It is very much present day now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go to Tony on some of his discussions that he's been part of, because like we're talking about here is that we could have done this 10 years ago, but it's becoming a reality today, 10 years later, to say now it's enforceable, now it's auditable, now you have to pay fine for this sort of activities that previously we could have just said, oh yeah, I'm good. What'd you do? Oh, I bought a new laptop. That's about it. Like, did you configure anything in it? Configure what? Right? That's 10 years ago. Today, you can get fined for that. Just because, you think you have a new laptop, you have bought a new services, that don't mean much, right? But AI expedites all of these conversations to a whole other level, because that rapid response, that ability to unplug everything in the right moment because of disaster recovery. I can just go on and on and on, but AI adds another flavor to it because of how fast this data can be processed, and these data can be used for nefarious reasons, right? Just nefarious is the one that I can use, because it could be just simple as your data stopped working because you've been processing it too fast. And all of a sudden, everything collapsed. And if everything collapsed, now it fell into the wrong hand because you weren't able to have the visibility of where your data has been. and like I said, I'm going to rely on Tony on that, because he's a database subject matter expert for CompTIA, and he has tons of experience working with databases. I mean, when you write a certification about databases and you've been doing it for decades, that tells you a level of expertise that we're talking about. So, Tony, what can I add to that? What are you thinking of as we speak on this topic?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, when you're talking about data, especially with the speed at which everything's moving, is where's it going?
Yeah.
If you're deploying an AI product, a third-party product, or if you're not deploying one from in-house, even if you are, whose language model are you using? What are you doing with your data? Where's your data moving? Because first of all, data no longer sits at rest. Even in my archive servers that I hold 10 years worth of data in, that data really isn't at rest anymore, because now it can be mined, it can be reused, it can be put into so many other places that I have to know where my data is, what my data is doing, and who's been given access to it. And I start each of my conversations when somebody comes to me and says, hey, we've got this new product we want to use, and we want to hook it into the archive database because we want to do this. And it's like, who's doing it? What are they using it for? Have you contacted the attorneys yet? Have the attorneys signed off on this? Has upper management signed off on it? Have you explained it to upper management in words they understand, to understand where that exfiltration of data is going, what it's going to do, and how it's being used outside of your control? Because once it's exfiltrated, you can't do anything anymore. It's gone. Once you've put it out the door, you don't get it back. So you better know what it's doing while it's migrating over there, because to me, data at rest is an illusion. It doesn't exist anymore. It may never have existed. We thought it did, but it doesn't exist. Not now. And what are you hoping that data that you're letting go out the door do? What's its intended purpose, and what is its real purpose? What's it really doing? Because they may not match up. And I have to know all that before I even sign off on anything that goes to upper management or goes to the attorneys or goes to the city council and says, I'm going to agree with the idea that this data be used in this way. And I'm going to recommend these controls on that data to comply with all of the state, federal, and even some cases international regulations that we may be touched on or may be bound by.
Well, we have a subject matter expert here also on CIA, right? He's going to talk about his confidentiality, integrity, availability, right? Because we need to know that. And Brian Starks of Starks Technology Services, what are you hearing, and what's giving you that smile on your face like, hey, let's jump into it, bro? You're on mute, I think. Are you on mute? Is your mic on? We'll fix it. Yeah. But this is some exciting stuff, because I use data at rest continuously in order to explain artificial intelligence. But the way Tony just mentioned it, I never actually looked at it from that angle, because I would say whatever's in rest, it's going into the motion, and whatever's in motion is going to get used. But if you don't have visibility in the data at rest and its use, that means you are not doing your data management very well. Your data portfolio is at loss. And I love that last piece of it. Your data no longer has integrity. Wow. Right. Brian, can we hear you? Oh, there you go.
You guys hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tony mentioned it. It goes back to the basic foundations and fundamentals. Darcy and I have had these conversations, Steve and Masako as well. It's the foundation, because we get all this as a C plus to say, don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. But we've gotten into the hype to where now we got to take a step back and go back to the principal foundations of CIA. A lot of times, I think Asif and Masako have heard me speak about it when I teach it. We can dummy this down in layman terms, and Tony, you mentioned it, as really a relationship. If we take a look at our basic foundations of what relationships, whether they're personal, professional, close friends, spouse, significant others, but the CIA, we talk about confidentiality. This is a confidential group here. No one needs to know what's going on behind the scenes as we talk about things to try to prepare, our deal, and to prepare companies for what's already here, but actually help them be successful. So that's the confidentiality. But as we continue to build the relationships, we base it on integrity. The integrity of the data never changes. It's not supposed to change unless you have authorized access control to it. So with these relationships that we're building right here, this is a foundation of integrity right here that we've built amongst each other. And then last but not least, when we talk about availability, right? We are available to each other, but we're not available for everybody else. Nobody has access to Darcy like we do. Nobody has access to me or Asif or even Masako. So we talk about the data being available, and I think Tony just really hit a lot of key points. Who, what, when, where, and how. Those are the questions as an ethical hacker perspective. That's what I'm asking. Who's got access to the data? Is it available to those that need it? Where is it going? How and why? Why do you need access to this data? So when we talk about the foundational part of CIA Triad, I mean, I think we just really hit it right there.
Yeah, I mean, without mentioning a name, but when you're driving down the highway and you see that big red circle with the circle in the middle of it, there's an infamous case of it, but that's really important to understand is that once they got hacked, they didn't get hacked because of their system was weak. It's just that they allowed a third party to access their system, authorized it, but because of the system vulnerability on the third party, they got totally hacked and their credit cards and all sorts of information got leaked. And that happened 10 years ago. We still talk about it today because that's a prime example of no matter how big you are, it's not you that's a bad driver. It's the other guys that has a bad driving skills. So we joke about it. We joke about it because we're talking about CMMC or we're talking about GRC, we're talking about data breach. And we're just trying to entertain here, but it's a serious matter. It's really is serious because if you understand CIA, if you understand data at rest, data in motion, data in use, all of a sudden your conversation really does change because you actually need to understand these two topics very well and understand AI very well. The AI is a hype word, right? But under it all is data, right? It's 3 different states of data, and that's what AI is, right? If you don't have control over any of these 3 in a manner that you can process all the data, you just have a garbage AI, right? AI that nobody uses. And just to give everybody that's listening kind of thinking like, you know what? I don't know anything about technology. I don't know anything about AI, but I'm definitely interested in career in one of them. It's really important that we understand that cybersecurity will ruin AI. And I mean that with all sincerity, right? Because of if you start seeing loss of integrity because of how AI is delivered, which is like a garbage AI, all of a sudden people will come off of it and say like, you know what? If I have to live with that, why even bother, right? That's not the type of AI I want, right? So today you see a lot of these AIs that are like high performing, all of a sudden they're degrading in quality. That's sort of that available data that's losing its integrity, right? And everybody's like, if it doesn't have integrity, how do I know it has confidentiality? And again, without naming a name, everybody uses that one thing called GPT. Guess what happened? They got told by the court from now on, you are no longer allowed to delete any of the data that you promised users that you will delete over time. So users' data is literally sitting on their end, and if they get compromised, all of our data gets leaked with it, right? As in our personal thoughts, our personal needs, things that we thought was temporary, it's literally stored in their system for anybody to access maliciously, right? So I go on and on about it, but you kind of see, all the connections, the dots, coming together slowly, right? And artificial intelligence, where do we start, right? We don't have to talk about all day artificial intelligence, but if you talk about data in layers, because I just love that idea, data at rest, data in motion, and data in use. If you just say that over and over, all of a sudden you get a different glimpse into AI. And anybody who's looking for a new career, new ways to engage with AI, or just saying, you know what, we need AI in our company. How do we approach it with the right framework, right? How do we approach it with the GRC in mind? How do we approach it with a standard or a governance, the compliance that we have to be liable for? How do we approach it? Well, approach it with those 3 steps. Where's your data at rest? How is it being motioned? And who's using it, right? If we cannot answer who's using it, something is wrong with the data in motion, data at rest. I'll just leave it at that. And anybody want to jump in, let's go for it, because this is an exciting conversation. Let's continue.
The only thing I'll add to that is that when you talk about these high profile situations that we're not naming names, they all have one thing in common. It was something that my late mentor used to always admonish us. Everything we did, do not appear above the fold. Looking back at the old style of print media, if you appeared above the fold on the Washington Post for the wrong reasons, you can't dig a hole deep enough to crawl into. So our goal has always been, and I still use this when I'm training, don't appear above the fold. Don't give anybody any reason to see you on the front page of any newspaper, or in this case now the headlines of any news website, because you didn't do your due diligence. You didn't follow, and it doesn't matter whether it's an AI tool or it's just a conventional data-driven tool. Yeah. If you don't know, if you realize what you don't know, you find it out. But if you don't know what you're missing, or you don't know what you don't know, you're in deep trouble.
Yes, right. How do we tie this into the CMC discussion, Brian? Like Darcy and Brian, tell us a little bit about the CMC side of things, because okay, I'll tell you my concern here. What if somebody's out there that has access to CMC information and they never separated their, again, I'm going to get something technical, but ask me more about it if you have any questions. You always need data for training purposes to develop an AI, right? No matter how big of an AI, small or big, you always need access to data. All of a sudden, you have this data that's coming from Pentagon, and you don't understand the difference between the data that's coming from Pentagon and your data that you're allowed to use. Above the fold situation, right? Somebody used Pentagon's data to train their model. There we go, right? So kind of give us a glimpse into it. What do you think about those data that's being stored, and how does CMMC play into that? Darcy or Brian, if you guys want to take a shot at this.
I was going to let Brian talk about it, because I am not aware of where AI fits in CMMC. I don't know that it's, and Brian can probably answer that question. Yeah. Or maybe.
Yeah, because hacking is same. It's like, CMMC data or non-CMMC data, right? CUI or non-CUI. Mm-hmm. I'm going to hack either way. And if I have to train my data, where am I getting the data from? Is it the CMMC data or non-CUI data? How do I know? Did I do my due diligence to separate those data, right?
Yeah, I think when it boils down to it, AI is just so fresh and new. Everybody's trying to get a piece of the pie. They're trying to figure out how it can be utilized. But really, let's just put AI to the back seat. Let's protect the data first.
Let's protect the data first. Right.
Let's focus on protecting the data first before we start integrating AI, because there's so many different components in the seat. You and I, we've had extensive conversations for months now. There's still AI governance. The AI has to be governed. When we're talking about AI hacking AI right now, I mean, it's insane. So to inject AI into CMMC, I mean, if companies want to utilize AI and put good databases together to train AI to do and help them with some of their security postures, great, go for it. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's focus on the basic foundations. And I hate to keep saying that, but it's actually true. And that's where a lot of companies, they missed it. And then now, as a result, because they're trying to be so sophisticated, you're missing that intricate details of just CMMC and the foundations of NES 800, 171. You've already missed a bigger picture. AI can assist us, but we don't need to start integrating AI to a point to where it controls everything.
Right.
I totally agree with Brian on that. It's like, security is the number one thing. So to implement AI in something that's not secure is crazy, because first AI has to know the rules. And so if you're putting AI into something with AI not knowing the rules, we know when AI knows the rules, it's an ally. But guess what? AI doesn't currently know the rules. And so it becomes a threat. So for you to not have security, you already have a threat. So then to put AI within that cybersecurity space, that's threat squared.
Yeah.
That's bad news bear.
Yeah.
It's trouble waiting to happen.
I guess you can't insure that one anymore. It's uninsurable.
I think you could look at it. So how I've even used it in we'll say the CMMC space, not directly in the CMMC space, but as you're saying, an ally in drafting policies or doing the parts that, none of us really enjoy, all that documentation, that procedural piece, and using it as an assistant in those areas, or being able to look for gaps in your policies and procedures, your governance piece. You're even giving you ideas how to question maybe your decision making and some of what you're putting in place, not specifically for that CUI, but in looking at your operations in general. Because we're talking about the CMMC requirements, particularly level 1, I've been telling business clients constantly, you need to be there anyway. I don't care who's requiring it from you. You, for your business security and your customer data security, need to be there anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
we're all
behind.
I think that's the kind of like the theme of this discussion here, is that this is so old. We are still catching up to the old, right? But the new stuff is here. Like, what do you do now, right? The new stuff is AI. New stuff is this fast data processing, fast hardware, fast software that does miracles, right? And how do you engage with that in a sensible way so you're not doing your, I guess, antithesis of due diligence, right? You're doing your due diligence to say, okay, look, if I'm going to have to write a disaster recovery plan, should I use AI? And should I use AI extensively to tell it, this is what happens last time? And I'm quoting again, CrowdStrike, right? The blue screen that we all saw back in October, right? I think October, where the whole world shut down because of Microsoft, and CrowdStrike went down, right? So what happened? Well, CrowdStrike and Microsoft didn't care. No, they did. But the customers that didn't have any system and didn't have a good disaster recovery put in place, should have they been thinking that, disaster recovery in 2025 is far different than 2015. Should we use AI to write our disaster recovery? Should we be doing some of this documentation? We should update it now that we have ChatGPT, now that we have Gemini, now that we have all this large language model, right? Can we do some things differently now, but not all of it? Because all of it means trouble, right? That's the due diligence piece of it, that, hey, CMMC data should not be going into a ChatGPT prompt, right? You should not be dragging and dropping a CUI document into the CMMC chat folder, right? So anyways, you get my point.
But that goes right along with the creating parameters and writing rules for your AI. So if it's gonna help with your automating your compliance, then you've already written those rules into your model. It's not blindly using it and then it's just choosing to go its own way and going off on a tangent, and then it goes back to the movies like, oh, what happened? The robot has taken over. There's no longer the human in it. What's happening? That's going to create a fear because you're automating something that has no parameters.
I love some of those movies, but most movies, they start off with the scary robot scenarios and they show it within an hour and a half how it ends for us. It's like, can you show me the one that we're in right now and slowly tell us how we get there in an hour and a half, instead of just jumping us into Terminator?
Well, it's always, I can tell you, with all of the movies that I have seen of late, it's always because everyone's trying to go somewhere very quickly.
That's right.
And so they let down their guard, and the protocols they may have used in the beginning, they're trying to get there very quickly. So all of that goes to the wayside, and then they're left with the monster, and they're like, "Oh, what happened?" Well, what happened is you removed the human out of it, and you allowed the robot to dictate the AI to dictate the rules, and then reiterate itself, right? So the program is reprogramming its own program to become something that you can no longer control as a human. And then what do you do?
Yeah.
Well, if I can tell you one company and one name without feeling guilty about it, the Chinese AI that does surveillance all over the China is called Skynet.
Mhm.
I don't know if there's a joke behind it. I just want to say it out loud. That system is called Skynet, and Skynet is what Terminator used as the evil program, right? AI program. But none of my business. That's in Chinese Mandarin, maybe. Who knows?
All right. Well,
If I were to encourage anybody to go see Megan 2.0.
Oh,
Okay.
Megan 2.0, it was a wonderful message about AI. Not giving out the nuggets of the movie, but it really showed it. I was very impressed with the message behind AI. And in a nutshell, I think we've all touched bases on it. It's training your AI to do whatever it is to make our lives easier, not for it to go into a deep learning and then start doing things autonomously on itself. But when you're talking about CMMC and AI, I'm like Darcy. That let's just leave the AI part because or are you going to train your AI to label all of your CUI? Or are you going to be sending CUI unencrypted? Or are you going to train the automation? So let's just, before we get too far ahead, let's get back to the basics. Get our clients, all of our, everyone that's handling CUI data, get that stuff labeled wherever it is. Get it labeled. Let's get back to the basic foundation, and let's not convolute this whole thing with AI. Because Darcy, I think, made a great point. We can use ChatGPT to maybe perhaps tweak some documentation and some governance, right? Some compliance. But ultimately, we still have to have the human element to go over because AI doesn't know what we have in our environment. They don't know. It doesn't. We have to train it. We have to train AI. So we still have a responsibility, as organizations, we have a responsibility to go through our own SSPs and our PROAMs and all of our risk assessments and security assessments. I even encourage companies, do a pen test, do a penetration test so that we can go through that thing very thoroughly, so that there's no type of, there's no confusion. We're all on the same page. We know where the vulnerabilities lie. Now let's work together so that we can help remediate those things.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing something that is, where we've been as is and to be, right? And we gotta take some action to become something else, right? And so, I think this part, let's kind of go through each of our background here, right? Brian has this amazing setup where people that are looking to do upskilling or professional development or just start a new career, right? His subject matter expertise is all those things that he's talking about, right? We have to educate ourselves, and education doesn't necessarily just starts with that idea that I need a new job, right? Just being aware is plenty, actually, because that means you are the defender of your system, and that system doesn't matter where it is, right? Be in manufacturing, be in a hospital, be in somewhere else. You're not supposed to click on that blue link just because you see it, right? You're not supposed to do a whole lot of things. So, Brian, why don't you give us a rundown of your services and your subject matter expertise? Because this is what we do in Smart AI community. We bring in businesses, we bring in folks to talk about their businesses and some of the things that they advocate for, right? The SMART, the A in Smart AI stands for advocacy, right? We want to be able to advocate for whatever we're passionate about. So Brian, Masako, Darcy, Tony, let's go for it. Let's tell people what it is that we're passionate about and what type of services that we provide. Brian?
Well, I'll say my passion has always been help. Even when I was a little kid, growing up in the church, and I would watch elderly people struggle to even get up the stairs, So I just had a niche to help those people, because I had a responsibility as a young person. If I could do something to help someone, then that is my responsibility because it's who I am. So throughout the years, my military career, and now being the name and the face of this organization that we all love, it's all about assisting and helping. So that's the passion, is to help educate. So here at Stars Technology Services, we provide so much education. It is just enjoyable to see people's lives being transformed. But not only that, but when they actually go get a career path in this IT, the cybersecurity field. But not only that, we also provide the services that can help every organization from small entrepreneurship, small, medium size, large, and enterprise level. Security as a service. It's been my go-to for quite a while now. Auditing as a service, compliance as a service, and then most importantly, training as a service. Because let's face it, everything, we have to be trained on everything, whether it's AI, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's understanding how to use Microsoft Word. we can help and deliver that service so that it makes your job a lot easier. But not only that, we can help make your job easier, but we also can help secure it at the same time.
That's right. Masako, you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go.
It's talking about yourself. Easily.
What was the question? No.
Tell us about yourself, please.
Tell us about myself. So I'm passionate about creating change within the communities that we live in, and one of the questions that I like to ask myself, and I would encourage everyone that's hearing my voice and watching my lips move right now, is to ask yourself the same question. And that question is, what are my best next steps to live my highest, best life? And so in that space, I have several things that I do, but it's all about community building. I'm a community builder. And so I partner with organizations such as Starks Technology Services, such as Kupva Solutions, such as Matrix Capital Trust, such as Educated Insurance Solutions Group, such as the Business Loan Smart Way to get a loan for your business. And so I partner with organizations because when I partner with organizations that align with my core competencies, then that extends my reach to assist in community building. And that starts with the person within their household, and that goes far and wide to entrepreneurs, to business owners, in order for each individual to equip themselves to live life on purpose. Because that question is what are my best next steps to live my highest, best life? And oftentimes people don't get there because they don't ask the right questions, but that is the right question. Because when you ask that question, it aligns you with people, services, and resources that will help you get to your next best step. And oftentimes people just don't know that because they're not asking the right questions. And so they find themselves in a situation asking like, oh my God, how did I get here? Or, oh my goodness, I'm going through this again. And so that puts them on a cycle. And so I'm a partner, I'm a community builder. In those spaces, it's cybersecurity, risk management, artificial intelligence, data literacy training, leadership and workforce coaching, business continuity and strategic consulting, digital literacy, technology foundation, financial coaching, economic empowerment. So, people say that, oh, you do so much, but I'm like, but do I really? I'm simply being a community builder and reaching out my hand to touch the cloth of those individuals that need something more to get outside of their current space. And so my whole purpose is for each individual I encounter to know what keeps them up at night so I can assist them in living their best life.
I'll vouch for that.
And I'm the Macame. That's what I do. Did that answer the question?
I think you got to answer another version of that too. You got a part 2 coming up. But Darcy, how about you?
Oh gosh, you're gonna make me follow Masako after that. Ditto? I don't know. So what lights me up is connection. I mean, everything that Brian shared about being a helper and being of service to people and what Masako shared about creating and I think connecting to, who your higher self is and what is possible. And I'm going to say my mantra, my catch line that I've shared with entrepreneurs for decades now, which is crazy to me, is anything is possible. And you just it's about commitment to that possibility. And we made all this up. We made this all up. It's not like it exists really separate from us. If we weren't here, it wouldn't exist, right? Humans.
Yeah.
Humans. And so my background is psychology. That's my degree. I love human behavior. And I love the outreach of technology as part of that. I am an entrepreneur. I love entrepreneurs because of their passion for creating something from nothing. That is like the greatest, I think, amazing gift we have as human beings. And AI is kind of an incredible offshoot of that to me. Like one we envisioned for a long time, like a lot of things. And we don't have to make it dystopian. That's a choice, right? We don't have to, because we get to create how it happens. So I'm really, I feel very joyful and fortunate in life that I get to work with people who are actively creating things. And I think the piece that lights me up is to be able to offer suggestions or guidance of forming their own connections, building teams that you don't have to be the expert in everything. There are experts out there. It's creating those relationships and bringing those people in. And then again, we're bigger than, the sum of all the parts. And also even those basic pieces, like we're talking about compliance and regulation, those seem like really dry, boring things, but it gives us, is where we do get to slow down. We do get to reflect on what do we really want and how do we want it to not just exist, but be sustained over time. We want it to exist over time. And so having those frameworks, having that foundation, making sure that it's solid and even can be replicated, is part of the part that lights me up. And then I just I geek out, and what Asif and I geek out all the time because we get into like the existential pieces of it. But to me, it's all existential. So I love what I do every day, and I'm very excited and fortunate to be, with the people I'm with.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I love that we are all here to help other people, right? That's the theme here. I got a special treat right now because
wait a minute. Pause for a second, Asif. I want to say something because you and Darcy have said a couple of times this evening that governance and compliance is boring. But I'm telling you guys, looking from the outside in, and I'm telling you guys, governance and compliance is exciting. And let me tell you why. Because it creates structure and discipline. And structure and discipline is where we thrive. That's because right. Everyone appreciates structure and discipline. Sometimes people act like they don't want it, but everyone appreciates it because it shows you that you love you. When you have the structure and the discipline, it allows you to thrive. So I'm telling you guys, you're saying it's boring, but I'm telling you it's not. With your governance and your compliance, that's exciting. That's the exciting stuff.
It's where things, it's the jumping off point. Yeah. It really is. And so thanks for saying that, Ms. Saka.
Yeah. No, well, I got a special treat because Tony can, jump into what Masako said, right? Well, what is that one little cartoon that somebody says like, who wants structured data? Everybody raise their hand. Who's gonna clean it? Oh, except for Tony. Everybody else like, put your hands down.
No, I can clean it. I can clean data. I have some data science immersive in my background. We love clean. That's another thing we love. We love structure. We love discipline, and we love clean.
There you go. Clean data. Who's gonna fit it? But I'll start with Tony here in a second, because we have a special treat from Tony, because he just recently finished his PhD. So not only are we going to hear about, all of the things that he's passionate about, but we want to hear about his journey into this PhD world that he just been through, right? And we're going to be the audience here to learn from him, because as he's teaching us what he's been through, I'm expecting that other people will listen and say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that, because it's not easy, but to get started is the hardest part, right? And once you get started, you just continue, because that's me. That's all of us here, right? We started at one point and it's just continued, right? We never said, oh, this is it, right? I'm stuck here forever. No, nothing like that. So, Tony, my friend, I'm always looking for, your next journey. So, but before we get started on that, talk to us about, your past, where you've been and where you're heading next.
As a kid, I was always in love with knowing everything. I wanted, if it was something I could learn, I wanted to learn it. And because of that, I basically kind of fell into working with data. But I fell into, I talk about falling into places because serendipity seems to be my best friend. I came into 911 out of a badly worded job application, a job help wanted ad. They said they wanted a CAD administrator, no experience required. Well, what they didn't say was CAD meant dispatch, not drafting. So I'm thinking they're designing their own jails, they're designing their own guns. No, I'm being told, what do you do if 911 goes down? It doesn't. That got me the job. And then I fell in love with the idea that I was supporting heroes on a daily basis. Yes. Because I'm sorry, those folks that sit in those seats, they are heroes beyond my abilities.
Yeah.
I was hired as a programmer, software developer. I became a data-focused software developer because I found the data was more fun to work with than the code that I was having to rewrite. I went ahead and finished a second bachelor's degree, started toward a master's. I wanted to focus in security because I wanted to focus on offensive programming. Forget defensive programming. I wanted to program offensively. I wanted to fix it before you knew it was broken or before anybody could figure out how it was broken. They said, nope, you don't have the background for it, but we have this data analytics program and you qualify. So I jumped into it. And then one thing led to another. I was analyzing how we responded to COVID-19 and how much of our response was technologically impacted and how much of it was people impacted. We found the technology was the bigger impact than the people. And I looked at my wife and she said, you're this close. You've always wanted a PhD. Let's go for the PhD in data science. And everything I did, I got in trouble with a couple of professors for it. Everything I did was focused around the centers, around working with my headset heroes and trying to find a way to make their lives better through the use of data. I've been lucky that I have done everything from architecture through data science, architecture, engineering, administration, management, governance. When it comes to data, I probably had my hands in it somewhere. I focused on one of the biggest problems in the centers, and that's staffing. We don't have enough people. But I got dragged into it when my director called me one day and said, have you heard of Erlang? Having a degree in software engineering, I'm like, yeah, it's a great programming language. You want to figure out staffing model using this programming language? It'd be a challenge, but it could do it. No. I went and looked, found out. I had no idea what she was talking about. I learned about Erlang algorithms, the queuing theory. At the same time, I was working on a PhD and realized they were telling us we needed to hire 3 times the staff that we had on hand. I'm seeing all the looks on your faces. Imagine the look on the city council's face when we wanted to go to them and say, we need to hire 3 times the number of people we currently employ. Yeah, Masako's face says it all.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. We said, how do we build a better mousetrap? And for me, it became, well, I can't tell you how many people you need if I don't know how many transactions you expect to handle.
Yeah.
So I started working on the other end of it. And I realized I'm a unicorn. I'm a database administrator and data scientist in a public safety answering point. There's probably maybe 2 or 3 other of me in the country that are dedicated to working in the center. There are other data scientists that work in the industry, but working in the center, there aren't that many of us. Yeah. But I live in a rural area outside of the city I work for, and they have maybe 1-2 dispatchers. They have 2 dispatchers on shift at each time. They don't have the resources to be able to do all the things I can do, and they can't afford to go out and hire someone to do what I can do. So I became really interested in how can I make the technology and the data more accessible to anybody at any technology level. I wrote a dissertation on evaluating LLM-based forecasting models or zero-shot forecasting models. How well do they work? They work well enough for what we need. For somebody that doesn't have the training to sit down and do everything by hand. Can I outperform them? Absolutely. I'm going to be slower, but I also know all of the details and the nuances and the exogenous factors and I know what the data looks like because I'm up to my elbows in the guts of it every day. But for somebody that can't be, how do I help create tools, whether they're AI or non-AI, that enable them to unlock all of the information that is hiding in their data? I had a marvelous professor for my first master's degree. His name was John Tatum. He was working on his PhD at the time he got it. He was always talking about how you convert data into information. And that's been my mantra that I work with when I work with data. The data is literally just, for me, it's a play toy. It's the building blocks. What I want to know is, how do I derive meaningful, impactful information that makes the lives of those people sitting in those chairs in that center just that little bit better? Whether it's in prophylaxis by going out to identify problems in the community that we can fix, that we don't have, so we don't have a call come in, or how do we employ technology to help handle those calls better so that at the end of the shift, I keep all of the dispatchers I had. I'm able to attract more into the profession, and I take care of those folks by taking care of the data that we generate and finding new and inventive uses for it. And that's my passion, is taking care of them. And I went for the education because I wanted those letters after my name so people would take me a little more seriously in my industry. Because now I'm the expert that knows what I'm talking about. I was the same expert that said the same things 3 years ago before I had the PhD behind my name. But now that it's behind my name, I'm taken a little more seriously, and I have a little more clout to advocate for the things that I'm most passionate about. Using the data that we generate on a daily basis to make our communities better, to take care of our telecommunicators better, and to make a difference when somebody picks up that phone on their worst day. I've got the best people in the world answering that phone, and if I can support them, then my career has been worth everything I have ever done to get here.
Yeah, Tony, I'm gonna see that 911 movie. I only reference I had of 911 before was the films that I had with 911 in it. But listening to your story, I've teared up thinking about the dispatchers and the people calling in. I've laughed and applauded you and championed turning this data into information that we could use. Well done. Well done.
Do yourself a favor. Contact your local center. Find out wherever you live. If you live in a larger city, it's probably going to be it's going to probably have its own emergency communication center. Reach out to them and say, I want to know more, especially with you being, saying that your whole job is community building. Mm-hmm. Reach out to that community. reach out to them and find out what they can tell you about your community. We are canaries in a coal mine. We can tell you what the problems are in your community because we hear them every day. We hear the problems. The trick is taking all of that information taking all that data in, and then finding out what to do with the information we can generate so that we can take it back to you and say, here, we've seen the problems. We're going to tell you where they are. We can help you find solutions, but we need to work together to find the solutions and build our community together.
I love that. I'm going to talk to you offline to find out who's my point person on that.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, you started with data at rest, and then cannery and coal mine. It literally popped in my head. Wait a second. All the calls in the world goes to that center for all the problems that we have in our community.
Right.
Wow. That's
you don't think
of it that way. You go to the library usually for problems, right? It's like, oh, I have a problem. I want to steal the data sets. You go to the library or some places, not call centers. My goodness, that's amazing.
It's not just the calls that come in when you dial 911. When you call the non-emergency number, in many cases it's a non-emergency number for your police department. You're still calling that same center. Yeah. You're just telling them this isn't life or death at this point. This is, I've got this guy that's parked in front of my house and that car hasn't moved for 3 days. Right. It's still an issue in the community that we can identify and we can help address. Just thankfully, it's not somebody's life is on the line or somebody's health is on the line. Right. And one of the things that we try to, and you're talking about AI, one of the things that we try to do is we're trying to find ways to use AI in a way that protects the data, because we have personally identifiable information. We have protected health information that comes in. When you call in and you say, I'm having chest pains, we're going to go into 20 questions mode. And a lot of that's PHI instantly. And we are trained on how to handle it. I go through classes every year, twice a year, on how to handle CJIS, criminal justice information. I have to know how to handle it on the back end. I have to know what I can release. When we get FOIA requests in, we have to know what can we release, what do we have to redact, and I'm trained on that. I'm recertified on that every year. I take additional training and certification to make sure that whatever I do, whatever I touch is made sure that I protect as much as I have to, as much as I can. So when I'm interrogating you about this new application you want to deploy, it's because I know what I'm sitting on. And I don't want to let you have one drop more than you absolutely need to do what you want to do. And then I want to evaluate how you do it to make sure that what you sold me is what I'm getting. And to know what my data is doing when it's moving outside of my control. And I bring all of that back to CompTIA when I'm writing these exam questions, because I'm passionate about making sure that the people that follow me, because I don't want to be the only data scientist in the 911 center, but I also don't want to be the only DBA that handles this data. Yeah. I want to know that the people that I'm helping in that career pathway will take this as seriously as I take it, because this is all your data. This is all these facts about you at your very worst. And I'm protecting it like it's my own, because it effectively is my own. I take ownership of it when I step every day, when I step under the floor, when I step into my office. I'm taking ownership of everything that's in there, because that's how I know it'll be taken care of. Yeah. Because I know what my training is. I know what my skill sets are. And I know that I will take care of your data. Yeah. Because that's my mission.
Yeah, that's one of the ways you do actually, help the next generation to think of the way you need to think, by writing a certification, and that certification promotes these sort of questions that they might not ask themselves all the time, but they have to study for it. And if they study for it, they have to know this somewhere in the back of their head to say, not that guy. Don't give it to the North Koreans. Give it to the South Koreans. There's a difference, right? Because, well, I mean, we were laughing about this, but here, the Google just told us the other day that North Koreans are using Gemini to write new resumes and submitting job application in USA.
Absolutely.
Right? So we need to know, HR, are you paying attention to who it is that you're doing a Zoom call with? And where are they located at? Do you know, at least technicality-wise, they can use deepfake to use accent that is literally from Florida or something like that, and they're interviewing from North Korea, like literally, right? So we gotta know this information. We gotta have this information in the back of our head, because it's not every day you're interviewing a North Korean from Zoom call with Florida accent, So I just say all those out loud because, look, me and Tony, when we sat down in the room and we were brainstorming about what to ask, questioning is the hardest part of learning. How do I get to a point of learning that I can just ask a question and feel comfortable about asking that question? But it starts with asking the dumb questions first, literally, right? If you think it's a dumb question, go ahead and ask it. Then you'll find out, wait, it wasn't so dumb, really, right? And then
not only that, but you'll find out how good your mentors are, because if they take your dumb question and they treat it seriously and they treat it with respect,
that's right,
then they're also telling you that you have value in the not only in the question, but the fact you thought of it.
Ask that next question. Yeah.
And not only that, but to Tony's point, ask the dumb question, because the person next to you, your left and your right, they may be wondering the same thing, but no one ever really stepped up. So then it becomes another training and learning opportunity based on the question.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that we do in the military courses, right? There's a dumb question, but we'll answer it anyway, right?
Right.
But it raises that community awareness that we can ask questions here. This is a safe space for me to ask that question. And if I ask that question, I help somebody else out, because now they say, you know what, I got a better question than that. And we don't know what question will ultimately lead us to just change everything, right? Because it happens quite frequently. Because if you feel comfortable about anything, you should be able to ask questions about it, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody is comfortable enough to ask those questions. So if you feel uncomfortable in this space where you're thinking like, I'm new, I'm not so sure what I'm getting into, ask questions. I think that's going to change dramatically based on every learning you have. If you are able to ask those questions, now you can indicate what it is that you don't know and what it is that you have to learn on top of that. So Tony is a good example of question banks.
Yeah, one thing that I like to ask when I find myself in situations where I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, that gives me permission to engage in dialogue is, okay, what should I be asking that I don't know to ask?
Right. Yeah. Help me with the question, please.
The other thing I always keep in mind when I'm either asking or answering questions is everybody that I interact with, I either started out the same place, or at some point they're going to go beyond me and I'm going to have to be the one that is now trying to follow their lead. So I use that to try to keep myself a little bit humble. Mm-hmm. I didn't start out knowing all this. I had to ask a ton of questions, as Asif will attest. I had to ask a ton of questions to get here.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that at some point in time, I'm going to run into somebody, and I always hope I do. And I feel comfortable here because I don't feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. I don't want to ever be the smartest person in the room, because if I can be in a room with people that are more intelligent than I am, then I have an opportunity to learn. And I mean, I've been learning all night from you four, so I know I'm in good company.
Well, I think one of the things that makes Tony very unique is questioning your question. He's helping you improve your questioning capability, saying, why are you asking that question? How did you come to that question? And what are you expected to get out of that question, right? This is something that an end user's mentality shift means, right? Like, so let me give you an example. If an end user sees a blue link, they know they're not supposed to click on that blue link because they've been trained on cybersecurity. That's it? Why aren't you clicking on that blue link? How will you know the difference between all the blue links, right? And what will come out of that blue link, right? What is the process once you click on that blue link to say, what happens next, right? Can you describe that? Can you ask that question with this where, when, what, all these things that comes with it? Probe a little bit deeper, right? But now here's the one thing that I always say is that you always have a Model T curve in learning, right? Everything goes flat, all of a sudden you go deep. So some guys knows a lot about cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and that blue link that you're not supposed to click on, right? But if you can at least ask the right question, you don't have to go deep, but you can go deep enough to say, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Right? That's too deep for me. That's how you know you're getting comfortable with learning, right? Because you learned a lot, but you cannot be learning everything. So I kind of want to, hit on my subject matter expertise here, because questioning, the reason I love Tony, this much, that, when I first met him, I just was blown away by how his brain thinks, is because in machine learning, one thing that I cannot stop teaching people is about their questioning methods. This questioning methods is not just important, it saves time and it saves tons of pain. If you can ask the right question at the right moment using the right data set, your machine learning journey becomes, instead of 6 months, 6 days. 6 days. If you can ask the questions even better, your machine learning journey, it could become a 6-hour one. And let me explain 6 hours and 6 days and 6 months. You rather ask the question and find out there's no point of asking that question in machine learning. You just say 6 hours later, I'm going to reframe that question. And if you want to develop a machine learning tool in 6 days, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, that's the core of artificial intelligence. You can have machine learning in 6 days because you asked the wrong question in the first hour, but you caught it early enough to say that was a wrong question to ask. In hour 6, I was able to change that question and say, now the question I asked, now it allowed me to deliver a machine learning, the output in 6 days because you asked the right question. And you had the courage to ask the right question no matter what other people thought. Mm-hmm. And these are sort of the power of questioning the right way and the right methods, right? So when Brian teaches somebody about CompTIA certifications on security or network, you're thinking to yourself, like, wait a second, I have this great machine learning use case, but because I asked some questions about networking, all of a sudden I know that would never work. Because the routers and switches are not made for the machine learning situations output that I'm looking for. Just simple as that, right? And you can think about like Masako, right? Masako is transforming people's lives to jobs. If you have a machine learning use case that you're thinking like, you know what, there's no job behind it. Why am I learning about that machine learning? Why don't I do something that will earn me some income and give me a potential pay raise? Question, right? Question in multiple fronts. Hardware, software, data, do they all fit, right? Machine learning, it's like what's the life cycle of my machine learning? What is the endpoint of my machine learning, right? What do I want out of this AI? So all these things comes down to questioning. And I think I wanted to have Tony in this conversation for a very long time, just to get this sort of conversation going about people that are just not even asking questions. They're sort of like just amazed by things.
And to further your point, my friend, one of the things that I give presentations on nationally to folks in the 911 industry is how to ask questions of your data. It's not just enough to say, I want to know what the average processing time was for our calls in April of 2025. Why do you want to know? What is it that you're actually looking for? When I get any data request, I have what I jokingly call in all my talks a Spice Girls moment. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And we pay 20 questions. Because to your point, that 30 minutes that I spend interrogating you as to what it is you're actually looking for becomes 6 hours I save on the back end getting it to you, because now I don't have to spend all that time figuring it out. And I had a presentation in April in Ashland, Virginia. Somebody said, well, how do you get started? So I, as a thought experiment. Started with one question. And I tracked that one question to all the different places you could go with it. Didn't require AI, didn't require machine learning. We came out with 52 questions from one question. Yeah. And each one of them was a different nuance, a different depth, but it told them so much more about what was going on in their center and how things have evolved, how things had changed. And when we started actually getting in toward questions that could be useful for AI, then we also had a whole bunch of questions you could ask your AI vendor or your AI developer on what is it going to do? How are you using my data? Are you using my data to retrain the model? Where is it going to go? How do you work with it? How do you take care of it? How do I measure what your output is against my success, what I define as success? Yeah. How do we define success? I've seen people deploy an AI, and I'm not going to throw a center under the bus, that deployed an AI translation program, and they had to remove it after a week because it had not been trained on the emergency lingo that we needed. Now, that company went back and they've reworked their models, and they've gotten cooperation from centers who've donated data that they separate off so they can train this model separately, and it's much better. Yeah. But those are the questions that we start asking, and it's the questions that I ask whenever a vendor says, "Hey, we want to introduce AI in your center in this way. What's it going to do for me? How are you handling my data? Are you requiring us to use our data for your training purposes? And how do we measure success?"
All right, guys. I know you guys have probably a lot of questions, so let's grill Tony here. But I do want to ask a question to Tony about those 52 questions. That reminds me of feature extraction, right? Mm-hmm. So you look at a big data set and you do a feature extraction. So, when we think about feature extraction from a data set, that's 52 questions, right? You start with one question, you end up with 52 questions because you're looking at the data set and you're saying, there's so many features here. This is not just name, last name, first name, and phone numbers. This is last name, first name, and the events of your life which changed you. What did you become after that event? I'm just going on about the 53rd question, right? Like, what happens to a person after they get in a car accident? How does that life transform? How do I find that out, right? But I'm just putting that out as an example. But tell us some, data set related things that you've seen where you're just like, I started here, but boy, we ended up in some other places. Like, what's your take on that?
Oh, the easiest one of the bunch, because I'm actually working it up as a possible presentation for a conference next year. When we work on calls, in a lot of cases, when an officer's done with a call, they need to go back to it later and they'll want to put time against the call for their reports. A lot of us have procedures, but one of the things that we try not to do is reopen a closed call. But it's the fastest thing to do. So what we found out was, how much did that impact us? Well, we found it impacted us in two ways. One, it could make us look incredibly good because sometimes we were showing that we closed the call 3 days before it actually arrived because it was when it got reopened. But at the other end, it sometimes created situations where it looked like we had a call sitting waiting for over a year before it was assigned again, because it got reopened for whatever reason to put time against it. And now we had a problem. And we had elapsed times, and those elapsed times, either in the negative or in the positive, in the outlier realms, really impacted what it looked like to the community and how we service the community, because the folks that were aggregating the data and publishing it to the community weren't taking those nuances into consideration. So I had to sit down and rework some of that so that we could say, No, we don't have calls that are sitting for a month at a time. We have calls that were only open for an hour and a half, but then it got opened a month later because somebody had to go back and record the time against it.
So if
we have to look at that.
As comfortable and
I have a question. This is a two-part question, Tony, and this has to do with previously you mentioned how it's extremely important to you to turn the data into information that is useful to you, and you're very passionate about it. I feel it when you shared it. So what has been one of your highest points of data that you turned into information, how it served the greatest purpose for you? And then what has been one of your lowest points that it didn't turn out the way you anticipated that it would?
The highest point was my master's thesis, my master's capstone project, actually. We analyzed the emergency communications center's response to COVID-19, starting with locking people into the center for 2 weeks at a time, to sending everybody home, to renting an entire floor of a hotel so that we could keep our operations rolling, but protect our telecommunicators at the same time. And what we found was something as simple as changing our VPN provider made an incredibly impactful difference to the positive in how quickly we responded to events in the community. Probably the lowest was the congressional shooting in Alexandria a few years ago. I got called into the investigation because I'm the guardian of the data and it happened in our jurisdiction. And as we went through, we looked at so many different calls. We kind of felt like we missed a red flag. We missed something because we didn't put the data into information fast enough, the right data into information fast enough, and we saw it after the fact. And regardless of your political output, the fact that someone was shot and harmed, thankfully not killed, but shot and harmed because because too many fractured systems did not come together to put the data into meaningful information fast enough, somebody got harmed. And that drives me to what can I do? What can we do with this data? What can we change? How can we change how we use it so that we can save a life, so that we can get to somebody a little faster? The American Heart Association will tell you that if you can put your hands on chest within seconds of somebody showing symptoms of a cardiac arrest, you can raise their survival rate to 90%. How fast can we recognize it and get those hands on chest to save that next life? How quickly can we get to a scene of a domestic to prevent something bad from happening because we can recognize a keyword or a stress point, or we can recognize something that rolls us that 2 seconds faster, because that 2 seconds might make a difference. And if we can save a life, if we can protect a life, then every second that we work is worth what we do.
Thanks for that. I have another question, and you may be able to answer this or you may not. But when we were talking earlier about 911, the 911 center, my mind always goes back to 911, the day. And listening to you right now talk about high points and low points and the capacity of receiving data, sharing data, and then getting it disseminated to the right sources and resources to do what is appropriate to save time and save lives. When it comes to 911, the day and the misappropriation of data, what are your thoughts, if you have any thoughts with regard to that, around the information that was released or the information that was shared that wasn't disseminated across agencies? What are your thoughts? Being a data scientist, when it comes to data and information, what are your thoughts around 911, the day?
We don't use nearly enough of it. We generate tons of it. And we barely scratch the surface of what we can do with it. Like I said, one of my goals is to use it to identify problems in the community that we can address before the phone's ever picked up and called. If we can cut down those calls before anybody picks up the phone, that's a win. Because that's maybe somebody doesn't have that bad day. Maybe that telecommunicator doesn't get that crying, hysterical parent on the phone because their child is in danger. If I can cut that down, if I can find new and inventive ways to use that data to make it better for my telecommunicators, if I can find a way to say, hey, this person has taken so many calls in this time, and these calls have all been fairly long, can we get them off the floor on a break now and find a way to to manage that so that we don't have a burnout situation, so that I don't have a telecommunicator to walk off shift silent and I don't know if they're okay or not? I want to make sure they go home okay. I want to find every possible way I can torture the data until it confesses so that I can make things better for the people in the headsets and the people they're serving in the community. And we don't use as much of it as we can. So I'm passionate about, can we find new ways? And somebody says, well, hey, can we look at this? I'll stop and look at it and we'll come up and see what it tells us. What can we find? You can ask the question. I'm going to help you find the data and we're going to find an answer.
What are some of the ways that you believe we can create change within our communities to, share information, whether it's
look at the types of calls we're getting. Look at the types of calls we're getting, where we're getting them, and when we're getting them. For example, do we see a situation where one county over from me is a food desert? There are no active grocery stores in the county. You have to leave the county to go buy fresh groceries one county over either direction. So let's look at their medical calls. Do we see areas that the farther you are from the grocery store, from fresh food by distance, do we see an increase in medical emergency calls? Could those be addressed by putting together, instead of putting together farmers markets once a month in a community, could we put together, pick up some of that produce that farmers that are trying to get rid of, purchase it, and then distribute it out into communities at risk? We know that certain communities have health issues that are found in a greater propensity in a community. Whether it's a Native American community, an African American community, a Latino community, it doesn't matter. There's different health issues that are more prevalent in a community. If we know that we have those communities in our midst, how can we work with our partners in public and private sector to address those in a way that don't become 911 calls? If we can take our community before they call 911, then we have a happier, healthier community, and we have a better community. We have a stronger community.
Yeah.
I like it.
We can use our data as a starting point because we can see the problem. Now, if we can take the problem to people who can help us devise a solution, and we can put the solution out there that can benefit all of us and make us all stronger, make us all wiser, make us all healthier, make us all safer, and at the same time, we reduce the number of calls coming in 911, how can we go wrong?
It goes back to that question I always say, what can we build together today?
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. I like that. I hope to work together soon.
I hope so. I think it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Tony? Because I think we're coming to an end here. But if you have any questions, this is your chance. You don't get to meet a CAD data scientist. But I got to tell you one thing about the models that Tony was describing, right? It's a model. You create those bar graphs and you figure out the anomalies like 9/11, right? There's outliers that happens, but guess what? An anomaly and outlier is they're the biggest teacher of everything else, right? So when you look at a bar graph and you see like, oh, average, 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 boom, there's an outlier over there. Well, that outlier teaches you a lot about averages if you knew how to ask the question, turn it around, right? Um, the famous joke is that all models are wrong, some are useful. All models are wrong, some are useful.
That
And
is
that's where
true.
Tony comes in, right? All models can be wrong as long as you can make it useful. The reason AI is so exciting is because it's delivered. People that don't find AI exciting, and again, I'm just kind of jokingly saying that, is that they have to clean up those data in order for this AI to work. Tony mentioned the canary in coal mine. Well, as a data ETL guys, we are the one that works in a coal mine all the time. We have to work in spaces that nobody wants to even get there. But guess where all the AI originates from? From those database where the data lives, and those data outliers and anomalies and models that is developed over time, they prove themselves to be worthy enough of something. All of a sudden you do design, you develop, and you develop more, you develop again, you develop and you fail, and then you develop again, and then all of a sudden you deploy. But people think it's just design, develop, and deploy. No, no, no. By the time you deployed, you already lost many things. You have to shred many of these data sets. So it's a difficult journey, but that's why it's so important. That's why everybody loves it today, because the chances of succeeding with your model that is useless is a little bit better today than it was yesterday, right? Because now you're seeing multiple other models. You're able to bring those models together and make things happen. Make things happen, like Tony just said. You're shaving off 1 or 2 seconds in response. That 1 or 2 seconds save lives, right? That 1 or 2 seconds of latency that you experience in a system could mean a whole lot of different things, this is the type of conversation me and Tony had, and like I said, my brain always was like, what are you talking about? Because I love it. These are the things that you don't necessarily say from financial reports. You're not looking at this from perspective of a manufacturing shop floor that wants to save 1 or 2 seconds in their manufacturing, because that's the type of stuff that I deal with most of the time. And then all of a sudden you hear Tony, he's talking about 1 or 2 seconds to save somebody's lives using EMT services. You're like, wait, what? That's amazing type of satisfaction that comes from the data and data analytics. So really, I want to thank all of you guys for joining this conversation. I get fascinated every time because we learn something new every time, right? And we learn it from each other. So our Smart AI community, we are for the specialist. That's the S in SMART, right? M for methods, A for advocacy, R and T for research and training. So we are all specialists here. We all have our methods and we all advocate. But we advocate through research and training because we have to continuously research and train. And when we do that over and over, we learn different things. As a specialist, you can ask me about many things, and I probably know some things about those little things, So whatever the case is, as a specialist, when we come to the table and we sit around with each other in a community of practice, as you can see right here, we come frequently enough, we learn more frequently, and we keep up to date. We learn more frequently. We're able to keep up with the ever-changing AI world. I blame it on NVIDIA because they does so many fascinating things every week that I'm just like, it's hard to keep up with. These hardwares are out of control, how innovative they are. And of course, with software that is being developed so rapidly and the data that is being produced so rapidly, it's really hard to keep up with AI guys, right? So as an advocate, I advocate for the fact that we all need to be educated and we all need to educate with each other. Look to your left, look to your right, and see who knows what and address that as your source of strength, right? So again, I had a blast learning, but let's go around the room and give our departing thoughts, and give a little shout out to everybody who's listening and what it is that you would like them to have as a call to action, so that way maybe they will do something different tomorrow after listening to you. I'll let Tony go first.
The one thing I'd say is if you live, especially in a rural community, and you have the skills to help technologically with your centers, reach out to them and see if there's something you can do to help. In some cases, they may say no, but they may say, hey, if you can help us write reports and show us something, whatever, and you're willing to go through and work with a pre-cleaned data set or whatever, find out what you can do to help. Find out what you can do to help them. And make sure that one other thing you can do, talk to your congressperson, because right now 911 telecommunicators are still classified as secretarial. They're not classified as first responders. They need to be, because they are the ultimate first responder. When you pick up that phone and you dial 911, they're the first voice you hear. They're not secretarial. They're first responders. They're the first responders. And we need to make sure they're treated that way. So one other thing to take away, reach out to your representatives, your senators, and tell them we need to change this, that 911 telecommunicators have to be first responders. We cannot keep calling them. In some states, they're recognized that way, but we need them federally recognized as first responders, not secretarial.
Awesome. Brian, any call to action?
I would just say for those that are watching all around on this podcast, is I live and breathe by the 3 Ds. You don't have to be an expert in everything that we're talking about. You may not even have a clue on what we're talking about, but just be determined, be dedicated, and be disciplined to the cause. Whatever your cause is, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's the DoD, no matter what it is, have the 3 Ds: determination, dedication, and be disciplined.
Darcy?
I just want to say thank you for letting me participate with such extraordinary people. And the call to action I have for our listeners are, we've covered a bit to ask those questions and have the courage to ask those questions, and know that you don't have to be the expert in everything. And when you ask those questions, the experts show up. It's shocking and surprising and fantastic. So there is a community out there, and we're all making mistakes. We're all learning, and we're all doing this together.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Darcy, for being here. Really appreciate you. Masako, your turn.
All right. A secure world is not built by tech alone. It's built by intention.
Oh, yeah.
I believe we can. I believe we must. Because people are not optional in systems. People are the system.
Vote for Masako.
Yeah. And you can find me on masakomay.com and Mommy to Be in Me.
Absolutely. And all of us here are just
in the smart community, smart AI,
that's right,
smart technology services, Coupa solutions.
No, all of us are here to support and help. So anyways, you feel like you need expertise from this group, just reach out to us and we'll get you in contact, because we all have all their contact information. But we'll first ask, hey, would you like to reach out?
Right, but what do we say, y'all? What do we say? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team.
Go with the team. That's right. That's right. Well, I feel energized. I don't know about you guys. So, is out.
Yes.
Until next time. That's it. That's it. That's how you do it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality